Assalamualaikum, everyone. Welcome to our Women Leadership and Panel hosted by Muslim Women in Technology. This is a really exciting month because we get to highlight the incredible women in our community and just celebrate what they do both in the professional space and in their personal life as well. We're really honored to have really three unique speakers who have trailblazed in their careers and also are going to share their insights on best practices on how we can attain leadership roles, something that's so deeply needed in our community, and to make sure that we have that representation in our jobs. So we'll get started. I'm going to pass it over to Alia. She'll do a quick introduction of herself. Actually, a quick intro about myself. My name's Safa. I'm the co-founder of Muslim Women in Technology. You all probably have seen me either in person or on virtual events like this. But again, thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. It'll be great. I'm going to pass over to Alia.
Hi, assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you everyone for joining. So my name is Alia. I am the Outreach and Partnerships Coordinator for Muslim Women in Tech. So we have a really exciting night planned for you all. We'll start out with some speaker introductions. We'll have the panel. So Safa has some great questions that we'll be asking our speakers, and then we'll do a Q&A. Q&A will be reserved towards the end, but if you have questions that pop up, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll be moderating questions from here on out. So to tell you all a little bit about Muslim Women in Technology, so our mission is to empower Muslim women and underrepresented groups in tech. So not only do we work primarily with the Muslim community, but we also work with other communities. We've, created coalitions with Latinas in tech, Black women in tech, and other folks that feel similar ways that we do when it comes to big tech spaces. So not only do we want to help empower other women who already work in the tech space, but we also want to help get people in and, create their careers for themselves. Some of the stuff that we've done in the past includes company-sponsored events and recruitment events, technical and professional workshops. We just recently launched a mentorship program to help folks find mentors and mentees. We have an incredible network of people that you all are now a part of, and especially our incredible speakers that have wonderful professional experience for everyone to learn from. And we've done over 15 plus events per year. More recently, we've transitioned to doing more in-person events, and we hope to start more chapter-based events based on cities. So we've done some events in Chicago and DC, hoping to do one in Boston very soon, and hopefully in the West Coast eventually as well. So if you want to stay in touch with us, please make sure to join our Slack group. That's probably a good way for you all to network and find out about job opportunities. Find us on LinkedIn, and Instagram is probably the best way to find out about our events. So thank you all for being here, and thanks for joining our community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alia, for that. And yeah, all the hard work, it can't be done without our team. So just want to give a quick shout out to our really amazing team that spans the Midwest, West Coast, East Coast. A lot of folks have moved cities within this year, had personal milestones too, but they were working tirelessly to make sure that we provided programming for a community. So won't give a quick introduction for everyone, but feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We'll drop that in the chat. But also, one thing I was going to give a quick plug is, just given current climate of everything that's happening right now with the market, there's a huge need for us to continue to serve our community. And one thing we are looking for is more people who are passionate about what we're doing. So if you do have a desire to help out Muslim Women Technology in some form, right, that doesn't need to be a board member, feel free to reach out to any of us. We'll be sending out a Google form in the next month, probably during Ramadan, just to gauge that interest from the community. But again, looking for any help as we just continue to scale and make sure that we're meeting our community's needs. Awesome. So the most exciting part is we finally get to introduce our incredible speakers. I'm personally really excited. The team is. I know I was telling the speakers earlier how thrilled folks in our community were, just because look at the screen, like we have such incredible backgrounds and unique paths to tech. So really excited to talk through what that looks like for Samira, Maham, and Sana. So I'll just do a quick intro, and feel free at any point of this discussion while I'm moderating, you all can direct any questions towards our speakers in the chat. We'll reserve the last 15 for Q&A, which Alia will be moderating. And yeah, feel free to share any feedback, anything you really resonate with our speakers. That collaboration space in the chat is all yours. Great. So I'll start by introducing our speaker, Samira, who unfortunately her power went out, everyone. So Samira dialed in very graciously. So just a heads up, if you can't see her spotlighted, she's dialed in. So I'll start with Samira. So Samira is a director within global public affairs at Microsoft. Prior, Samira worked at the intersection of social innovation, impact, and tech at both Microsoft and Salesforce. She's worked across corporations, governments, and the social sector for over 15 years on innovative solutions to solving some of society's greatest challenges. She's especially interested in business model innovations for good, including new ideas to deepen purpose and empathy, enhance well-being, and build ethics into tech. Her work has also spanned the Americas, the Middle East, and Asia. Samira is also interested in some of the most vulnerable communities across the globe and how to best support them. She's a former strategy and management consultant with a policy and management and engineering background. Samira is also passionate about topics related to DEI, the ESG space, education, employment, and digital inclusion, gender and youth empowerment, SDGs. Great. So that's Samira. And then our next speaker is Maham. Super excited to feature Maham. Maham Chaudhary currently works for the corporate legal team at Netflix and rights management, overseeing licensing rights with major studios. She received her JD from the University of San Francisco School of Law. She is also one of the founders and co-heads for the Muslim at Netflix Employee Resource Group. Outside of work, she has mentored high school students with the Step Up program, done interfaith education with the Islamic network groups in the past. She also resides in the Los Angeles areas and is often found running around with a rambunctious toddler and watching a Korean drama. Yeah, we'll have to ask you what your favorite K-drama is, Maham, because I'm trying to get into it. That's awesome. And our last speaker.
I have a lot of opinions, girl. So it's a can of worms.
That's awesome. Yeah. So our last speaker is Sana. And just for context, we actually had Sana on a previous panel for product management a few years ago. When we were thinking about putting speakers together, it was like a no-brainer to bring Sana back. So again, really happy to have Sana here. Sana is the director of product management at Redwood Logistics. In the past, she has led a development team of 50 employees who implement applications for the healthcare benefits tech space, leveraging big data and analytics to help employees make better health, wealth, and work-life decisions. With over 10 plus years of startup experience, she has diverse experience leading teams across the country and India, managing software development and product strategy for different industries, such as real estate, insurance, and healthcare. Awesome. So those are our speakers. Yeah, feel free to share any questions you have, but we'll get started now on the actual panel moderation. So just in light of Women's History Month and how important this month is to so many women, so many young people like myself who are aspiring, to just continue to grow in their careers, we can start with you, Maham. Just want to talk to you about how has your path looked like going from someone maybe at a junior level into leadership? Do you have a formula or framework that helps people, no matter what profession it is, help them guide them to that next step in their career?
I don't have a formula or a framework, but I do think being a woman helped, because I think what happened is, for me, I started off in a more like analyst level, independent contractor type role. And I think being able to juggle as many things as many women often do, including having a child, really, I think was one of those things that, there were opportunities that come up at work and you can do as much as the next person, but being able to do all of that on top of being a parent is what I like to think what really made me stand out and show that, hey, this person can really handle whatever comes her way. And so not a secret formula, but I feel like really lean into that identity that you have.
Yeah, that's great. Sana, Samira, any thoughts on what it was like for you just finding your leadership role, if you had people who might have helped you along the way too?
Sure, I can give some insights on that. I think passion and working really hard, speaks volumes. You don't have to say anything, but your work kind of speaks for you. And if you're extremely hungry and you have a goal that you're trying to achieve, like at a very young age, I knew I wanted to be a director. I wanted to be a VP. So once I had that in mind, I was very vocal about it with my manager and my mentor. And I just started to work towards that. And once I identified those goals, managing people was a really big one that the executive team looks for. So if you start mentoring and managing at a younger, level, or, it helps you grow. And then it helps you fit into that role for a leadership.
And I'm happy to add to it as well. Again, I apologize for not being on camera. For me, it's, also less of a formula. It's very much intuition driven. And I think it's about your philosophy and your mindset. So just being very resilient if any sort of change comes your way, and being able to adjust. I feel being a woman actually is in general a barrier, and I think it can be an even greater barrier if it's combined with race and culture, etc. So I've always just tried to go with my gut. I've been driven by passion. That's the main thing that drives me, but it's often tempered, by reality, because I have young children. I got married at a certain juncture. Financial and economic realities were certainly in play. So as much as possible, I'm driven by like a philosophy to do good, purpose, and passion, but then again, always within the confines of trying to make a lot of other things, work. So at each step of the way, I think I've had to evaluate, like, is this the next option that's going to help me deepen my impact? And then does it actually work for my life? And I know you had asked another question about those who had helped along the way. So just, I'd say very quickly, there have been 3 kind of categories of people who've helped me along the way. One would be just engaging with people who are not in corporate America, who are not in tech, who are not in any actually, organized group, more like creatives, artists, just entrepreneurs. I think I've learned a lot from them about taking risk. I think that they value the impact of their work differently than I've seen it be valued in corporate America. And there's a broader persona and a more diverse set of people who are captured. So that's one group. And then the second group is like some, superiors I've had in the past have been fairly enlightened in the way in which they view partnership with junior colleagues. I think they leaned into my strengths, gave me opportunities, and treated me like an equal in terms of particular opportunities and recognition. And I think that did a lot for me. And then the third would be just other women. So other women who I don't even necessarily know, but if they hear me like being cut off in a meeting or being shut out, or if they sense anything, they kind of jump in and redirect the person. And I've seen a lot of women do this in very non-traditional settings. And they're people who I don't know well, and they've always stood out in my mind.
Yeah, you brought up a really interesting point, Samira, about finding mentors or sponsors that are not even within your field. And I think about this a lot. I think it's important to have women mentors, but sometimes I found that even men can advocate for you too in the workplace. It's hard, but I think you just have to ask for the help sometimes. So on that topic, I wanted to talk more about like representation in the workplace, specifically around like promotions too. So I think there's this concept of the broken rung, right? At the first step up to manager, for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 86 women were promoted. So as a result, men significantly outnumbered women at the manager level, which means that there's far fewer women who are getting promoted higher up. So I guess if you had any advice to give to people who are early, or even people who are trying to get to that level, how do you make yourself in a position at work where you're either really visible in the projects that you're doing, or being, making sure that you're aligned to the right things too? Because I think often it's hard to ask for those things as women. We feel like we either don't deserve it. Meanwhile, in the back, people do it, without shame. They'll just ask for what they want. So how do we change that culture where we shy away from those things and make sure that we get further in our careers? Maham, if you want to talk to that too, because I know you have experience with, working at Netflix, you co-spearheaded your G group. All those things probably help with visibility and just your story as well.
Yeah, that's exactly the example I was going to give, in that I helped start the Muslim Employee Resource Group. And I think it was one of those things that, you know, this has come up already in our panel, but I felt like at times you have to create the opportunities for yourself if they're not being presented for you. And I hadn't managed people before, but I think the experience of creating an employee resource group from scratch, and as a result, that expanded a lot of the folks that I worked with in the company outside of, it's really easy to get siloed, I think. And so it forced me to interact with other folks and build a lot of different skills. And I think it was very clear when I got promoted, it was written in there. It's like, she helped spearhead this employee resource group. And that is like one reason why we think we can make her a people manager. And so I think there is very clearly for me a direct link, but I think to what someone said earlier, in my initial role at the company, it was more of an analyst role. And so there weren't opportunities to become a people manager. And it very much felt like, someone had to leave for that opportunity to open up. And I think finding ways to grow and like create those skills for yourself was something I had to do on my own. It wasn't like a path that my manager or anyone else, my HR person, carved for me. It was very much like, let me show you that I have these skills and I can prove it to you in another way.
Yeah, I love that. That's really important, especially on that topic too, Mom. I wanted to quickly ask a follow-up question, and maybe Sana, Samir, you have context in this too. Lean In had a report where they said that women often end up doing double the work. They'll excel in their professional careers, right? They'll deliver their projects, excellent, all of that. But then they're also in the background doing a lot of D&I efforts. Sometimes they're not rewarded for it, but their coworkers or teammates who might be male, they don't do those things, period. So I guess Sana, just, and Samira too, do you have any thoughts on that process, on how we prevent that? Or is there anything that we can do as women to make sure, one, we're not overstacking our plates? Because I find I do this a lot too at work, is I try to do as much as I can thinking this will really help me, but then you either get burned out as a result, and then sometimes your work doesn't really necessarily lead to fruition all the time too. And that can be really disappointing for women, and also leads to a lot of people leaving their companies too.
I could take this one. Sorry, there's an awkward silence. I think a couple of different ways that I've kind of navigated through that is, not only have I had mentors within the organization who advocated for me because they knew it was a safe space where I can open up and talk about how I was feeling, what projects I was working on, and any extra work that I took on. But I also had friendtors. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of this, but they're maybe your peers who advocate for you. It's a safe space for you to talk to them. They're mentoring you and guiding you, and also allow you to talk about projects. And once I built those friendtors throughout the organization, they were in meetings that I was not in, and they advocated for me. They said like, oh, did you know Sana is actually working on something that you guys are discussing right now? You guys should reach out to Sana. And we just kind of backed each other up and advocated for each other. And that really helped. Hearing someone that's your peer speak up for you and talk about a project or something, significant that you did that impacted their role or helped them, really helped me, as well as our team, grow a bond and really help push us, especially the women within the company.
Yeah, I love the concept of a friend tour. That's really important to have people at work, not that you just have a professional relationship with too, but people you can candidly speak about so they can advocate for you in those other rooms that you're not in. Love that. Samir, I know you do a lot of work at Microsoft, just with the ESG space, a lot of, ethics work. Do you want to talk about some of those projects and how that has helped you formalize a role in leadership too at Microsoft as a director?
Yeah, so I will actually start with just my experience at Salesforce, because it was my first experience or foray into tech. And I think one of the things that really helped me is leaning into this curiosity, this thirst for knowledge, this hunger, and this ability to quickly get up to speed, and then share sort of value add ideas with different people. So I've benefited from trying to learn how each of the leaders sort of works in my organization and how specific people are influencing or moving the needle on topics, whether it's social impact or ESG, et cetera, and then providing them with something that's like a value add idea, building off of their ideas and really trying to partner and collaborate with them. I think that really, really helped me build my network at Salesforce, even though I was new to tech and not new to social impact, but new to tech. So I think I was able to learn just from so many different people by almost going in with a giving mentality. And I think I took that with me to Microsoft. It's been a little harder at Microsoft because I was hired as a sort of, during the pandemic. So that was interesting. But I think it's a similar sort of philosophy that needs to be implemented, which is just like, how can what I bring to the table add value to what you're doing, and how can we build something together? How can we partner?
Yeah, I love that approach. You came at it from a more collaborative point of view. And that's really important too, as we work in these roles, that, seeing people that you work with as a way also to move up, and using that, using people as resources too is really important. I wanted to switch topics, Maham, to something that you said in your quote that really resonated with me, because I'm someone who also had a really interesting journey into tech, switched my major a bunch of times, bunch of different tech roles. So I want to talk to you about your quote, "Bloom where you are planted," and where that inspiration came from. And also, your background's really interesting because you have a law degree and you work at a big tech company. So I'd love to talk to you about that intersection. And one, if you have advice for our audience, because what we see at Muslim Women Technology is a lot of interest in people going into tech, but sometimes they think that's either software engineering or really technical roles. And we're really trying to break that stigma that tech can be a lot of different things. So I'd love for you to just shed light on your own personal journey, because it's really inspiring.
Sure. I can give you a quick rundown. I went to law school straight after undergrad. I think my parents are Pakistani. It's like kind of what's expected of you is you pick a grad school and you go. And so I ended up at law school. They told me I like to talk a lot, so that was a good fit. That is not the formula that you should use. And so I went into law school initially thinking I wanted to do public interest law. There's a lot of domestic violence in the South Asian community, and it's something I had volunteered with earlier when I was an undergrad, and I felt like there was a big need for Muslim representation in that space. So I went in with that intention. I did one summer internship, and I was burnt out from a summer internship, and I quickly realized that I was just not good at it. And I think it made me realize that you could be really passionate about something and be really you want the best for every person, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a good fit for you, because I really wanted to help these women. And I think for me, I just realized I had to take a step back and say, I am way too emotionally invested in this. And so this is not the right fit for me. Once I came to that realization, I was like, I am already in law school and I have invested this time and money. So what else do I want to do? And I was interested in IP. I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really fascinating. So I ended up specializing in like IP, like soft IP law. I didn't have a technical background, so I wasn't able to do other types of IP like patent law. And then when I was graduating from law school, I kind of didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do. Again, I think part of it was I went to law school straight from undergrad, so I didn't have a lot of career experience. I did some internships for the government, and it was one of those things your parents tell you, hey, work for the government, great benefits. But it was, again, something that was just not a right fit for me. When I graduated, I got married about a month after I graduated. So had a great wedding, did not study for the bar exam. And so as a result, I, in my head knew that I was going to take the bar exam again later. And then just with how life happens, it didn't happen for a while. And I was like, hey, there's this huge gap in my resume. I also ended up moving to Southern California and I didn't have a network here. And so finances played a part in it. And I just started looking for jobs. And I was like, hey, I will do anything that is somewhat related to my degree. And I found a temp position at Warner Brothers doing intellectual property rights management. I had no idea what it was, but I was like, hey, I have a degree in that. I think I could do it. And so I applied. I started working there. And I quickly realized this like very random niche field was exactly everything that I loved about law school without the things that I hated. I'm not good at negotiating. I am way too gullible. I hate drafting contracts, but I loved reading them. They were always like a puzzle piece for me. And so I found this niche position where basically my role is essentially I read a lot of contracts and then I make language that the contracts have into digestible data for people who are not lawyers or from the legal field. And I love data. I was the type of mom that when I had my kid, I tracked everything. I tracked when he slept and every diaper and all of that. And so it just felt like a more natural fit to my personality. And I found this niche position and never thought about going back to try to practice law. And so the reason I picked the quote, bloom where you're planted, is I think a lot of times there are people in my life and just different folks that, you know, you would think a lot of these things are really sad and terrible times in your life. Like, oh my God, something that I thought would work out really well didn't, and things didn't go as planned. But truly, I'm a big believer that like if one door is closed for you, it's because another is opened, and Allah is the best of planners. And it led me to the path that I'm on right now, where I'm really, really happy. So that's my long-winded story.
Yeah, and I find that sometimes the best stories and careers are the ones that aren't linear. There's a bunch of stops. And, you know, I think that's the most exciting thing about tech is it looks so different for every person. And I think that's what inspired me going into it too. I felt really discouraged, you know, like, oh, I'm not going to be a computer science student anymore. I'm not going to be a software engineer. Like, what else is out there? So it's really inspiring to hear that there's something for everyone out there. And it's just a matter of using your passion and interest to help find that. On that note too, I know Sana, you have a pretty unique path into product, which is a really hot field right now. Everyone's trying to get into it. Startups, corporations, everyone is so focused on being customer obsessed. So would love to talk to you about your experience going into product and what that looked like for you early on.
Yeah, I had a very interesting, my educational background's in marketing. So if you would have asked me when I was in college, if I would have been a product director, I'd have been like, absolutely not. So I started doing inside sales at Sara Lee Coffee and Tea. That was my first job out of college. And then I just realized right away that a big corporation was not for me. I just started talking to people. I was the youngest employee in the company, and they made that very well known in a lot of the meetings that I was fresh, you know, out of college. And I just felt a little lost, to be honest. And I started talking to a few of my mentors, and that's when I got into the startup space. I loved wearing multiple hats. I loved, you know, going into meetings that I had no responsibilities in, but just listen to learn, which I didn't feel that I could do in larger companies. So I started then transitioning into different roles. You know, startup space, you kind of roll up your sleeves and do whatever, you know, you need to fill that gap. So I went from account management to, you know, a little bit more of sales and managing, you know, some teams. And then I transitioned into product marketing. And that's when I felt like I found my calling. It was, you know, I had my foot in marketing and then I had my foot in product, but, you know, I didn't have any technical background, so I felt safe. But one of my CTOs pulled me into his room and said, hey, Sana, we have an opening for a product manager. I think you'd be a great fit. You come from a, you know, vast amount of different backgrounds. You are very empathetic. You can take what is going on in each department and understand it and build it into a product. And I was like, absolutely not. You're setting me up for failure. I don't want to do this. I'm not technical. I don't even know how to talk to engineers. I don't know what they're speaking. It's a foreign language to me. And I really stepped back and was like, no. And we had multiple meetings. He's one of my mentors till this day. And we made a deal. He said, all right, why don't you try it? If you don't like it, I'll give you your role back. And that's when I felt, okay, this guy really is seeing something in me that I'm not seeing in myself, because I don't have that confidence as someone so young in my career. And I, jumped in, and I haven't looked back. I love product. I actually think this is my calling. I love building products and applications, understanding the user experience, being extremely empathetic to each department, because product touches every single role, from HR to finance to every single role within a company we touch. So with that, I've been able to take everything I've learned throughout my career and really build applications that make a difference in people's lives.
That's amazing. And the fact that someone else, it's so true. Sometimes you don't see that potential in yourself, but someone sees it in you and really pushes you for that stretch role that you just think you can't do. And then you amaze yourself and you're like, wow, I can do this. So that's so inspiring. As someone also like in the product delivery space, I really appreciate that. I also wanted to talk to Samira about her experience, because Samira has a really interesting background. She's done a lot of different things, but she actually was a management consultant before she went into like nonprofit work, ESG space. So Samira, do you want to talk about that? Like what was like the inflection point in your career where you thought, I have to move away from this and do more social good and innovation work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually always, meaning starting in college, knew that I wanted to focus more on social impact. I studied management science and engineering, which was like a tech and business degree combined, but I was focused on some of the sort of humanities side of things. I took innovation courses, human rights courses, etc. So I definitely envisioned a world where I would bring it all together. I've always been interdisciplinary, which has its trade-offs. It is like exciting to me, but it's often hard to make the case for any one given sort of traditional role. So sometimes you're viewed as like, just a jack of all trades, etc. So that's the downside, but the positive is I think you're more flexible. At least I like to believe you're more flexible. You're more agile. I certainly stay more engaged with work. So I pretty much knew that I wanted to bring different spaces together: tech, policy, innovation, and the human side. I have a very deep love for arts and storytelling, etc. So I just kept trying to carve out spaces for me to incorporate social impact into whatever I do. I fell into consulting. So after studying, management science and engineering, I went and got a policy degree, and I was not getting any good roles in sort of the UN space. I wanted to go to an intergovernmental organization. I hadn't taken like the foreign service exams, etc., and a consulting firm just came to recruit. And it sounded like a good way to get like a, mini MBA, as well as experience with a lot of different organizations and clients. And for someone who had a hard time picking, it was like a very good place to grow and learn. I got to, work with the Department of Commerce, Department of Education, all sorts of experience early on, switched to a few different firms, and then kept trying to make my way basically into sort of more and more social impact focused roles. So from, Accenture, I went to a boutique firm in Abu Dhabi. I wanted the global experience. Went to then Carney, where I had a traditional sort of business consulting role that started with the US government and then was more private sector, but also sort of supported their social impact work. So that was a really great platform to build some relationships. And from there, I went to a niche social impact consulting firm. And then the inflection point came when I pretty much decided that, consulting, I hadn't really seen what the ins and outs were of an actual organization that's trying to build something. So that's why I joined a social enterprise. And I was like the fourth or fifth employee working on sort of a workforce solution. And then from there, just personal circumstances, etc., eventually made my way into tech because we moved to the West Coast. And at that point, I realized, wow, I've come full circle. This is exactly where I want to be. I'm working on social impact. I'm working, in the tech space. I'd say the biggest gap for me now is that I'm not necessarily working with some of the hardest to reach populations as much in a hands-on way. And the arts and storytelling piece is something I'm figuring out how I can work into the future.
Yeah, that's incredible, Samira. Also, the fact that you have I feel like when people think about working in big tech, it's right, you're very like left-brained, you're super technical, but the fact that you want to weave in that personal side, that touch of like arts and storytelling, I think that makes for a really compelling pace to a compelling story to bring into tech. That's really, really interesting. I want to switch gears into another topic that a lot of women leaders are experiencing, and it was really interesting. I read a report that young women are actually following suit on this too. So women are more burned out than they were a year ago, and the gap between that burnout for women and men has almost doubled. So in the past year, 1 in 3 women have considered either leaving the workforce or downshifting their careers. This is a significant increase from what we saw like in the first few months of the pandemic. Sana, I know like this is a topic very near and dear to your heart, so I wanted to have you speak about this first, but what is your experience with burnout? If someone is really struggling to take that break, obviously like this climate doesn't make it easier. I think people are just trying to hang on to what they have, but I think it's important to ask like, how do you help women manage that? And how do you stay connected even after you decide you want to enter back into the workforce?
Yeah, I think this is extremely relevant to me right now. I'm actually currently not working, and I've taken a year off. And the reason why I've done that is I was extremely burnt out. I've been in the startup space for over 15 years. And if you come from that space, you know you're working 80, 90 hours. I had teams in India, so I was going around the clock with the time difference. And I just realized that my health was taking a toll. I also had a couple deaths in my family that were very close and sudden. And I was at a point where I just felt like I needed a timeout. My body was hurting. I was anxious. I just wasn't, myself. I wasn't able to give 110% and be that leader that, the company deserved or that my team deserved. So I talked to my managers and I was very vulnerable and very honest. And I think one thing that we need to really understand is a lot of companies have benefits for burnout, and we should take advantage of them. And we should not be ashamed or guilty to raise our hand and say, you know what, I need a timeout. I need to take a break. And maybe, either you go on a leave or, you walk away and you say, you know what, I'll come back into the workforce once I'm mentally and physically in the right space to do so. For me personally, it took a lot of soul searching to do that. I'm a very type A overachiever, and I was at the peak of my career. So for me to walk away and take a step back, and in that mix, I also got married, I had a child. So there was just so many different changes that were going on that I needed to just, take a breather. And I'm so glad I did, because I feel so much better right now than I did a year ago. If you came to me a year ago, I don't think I was in the right headspace. And I think my work was slipping a little bit. And I don't think that was fair to my employer, to my teams, to who I was managing. So right now I'm still, my daughter's 3 months old. So I'm enjoying time with her. Motherhood is, a job in itself. If anybody here has children, and I'm learning, how to be the best mother I can be, the best wife I can be. But, I still keep my foot in the door. I attend a lot of networking events. I attend organizations like this, like amazing organizations where I'm able to meet people. I still keep in touch with all of my mentors, my friend-tors. I still ask about the products that I used to work on, just to kind of see where their vision and strategy is now. So I kind of still am keeping my brain going. I'm always reading. And when I'm ready, I think, I can, easily reach out to some of my managers and say, hey, do you have a role open? I'm back ready, fresh 110% ready to go back in.
I wanted to add to that as well. Thank you, Sana, for sharing. But I'm very open about how I have a therapist. And I don't think that people should wait to feel like they're burnt out before you start taking advantage of these benefits that most tech companies already provide you. Get your money's worth, girl. Like, they are paying for it, and use your benefits and take advantage of them. And the way that I think about it is a lot of this is preventative. I went through a traumatic, like near-death experience 2 years ago, and everyone's like often commented like, wow, like you're doing so well. And I was like, yeah, I was already going to a therapist before that happened. Like I had sorted out a lot of things before I was in that situation. And so again, don't wait until you feel like you have to go. It's preventative. And so start going now if you can, and your company helps cover it.
Wow, yeah. Thank you, Son and Maham, for sharing that. I think, the one nice thing is I think this topic is becoming less taboo now, just because a lot of people and social media putting awareness on this. And, I think even people make startups sound really fun and exciting. I'm sure Samira, Maham, working at big tech, right? There's this, big red curtain, and behind the scenes, there's so much more that goes on, right? Week to week. And we don't really get to talk about that stuff. So appreciate you sharing that. And it's also really important for everyone in this room to realize if you ever feel like you're being burnt out, like talk to someone. There's probably someone else who has felt that too. So you're not alone in that process. And it might be scary in the moment, but if you're not well, you're not able to deliver to even like your family, to your company well either. So it has a domino effect for sure. On that note, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your distinct leadership style. So I know everyone's different and has different flavors. So Samira, maybe we can talk about you at Microsoft. What's your leadership style? How do you like to communicate with people? I know you probably have a lot of people leadership experience too, but would love to know more about your leadership style and what inspires you.
Sure. So I think I have far less probably people leadership experience than others on this panel. So just want to be transparent about that, but definitely, some form of leadership experience. And I feel very, very, very strongly about leadership style. It is something that I have thought hard about and I've cultivated, even if I don't have it at work. I am the mother of 3 children. I have to show up in a certain way in the community, with my family, etc. And it's something that I think is just deeply important. And I think there's a huge difference between leading a program, a unit, a department, and leading a vision and a movement. And if you're leading something that's big, that's a dream, that's bold, I think you need to empower those around you. It is so important to do that. In some cases, you even need to take a back seat and allow somebody else to, not allow, but just create the path for them to shine, help them shine. Sometimes with my children, I'll do things and I'll make a mistake myself so that when they see that, they feel comfortable making mistakes in front of me. And I think that when you lead in that way, that somebody can trust that you're trying to empower them, you're trying to help them, it just builds a different type of relationship. And you may not get the best outcomes in the short term, but when they realize that you actually care in that way, I think they feel like more of an equal. I often also try to take an inquiry-based approach to things. So I don't like to be sort of very directive, and I guess, I want people to come to not the same answer, but their own sort of answers to questions. So I will ask them a number of questions. I will try to support them with all of the knowledge that I have, maybe relationships that I have, but I ultimately want them to come up with the solution and act in a way that makes them feel independent and empowered. I don't believe that there are people who are fundamentally so much smarter than other people or so much more talented. I think we each have our own strengths, and people need to learn to lean into those strengths better, to support those strengths in other people, to communicate about those strengths differently. And I've seen a lot of I think tech is a very egocentric industry. I think corporate America can be very egocentric, and people feel under control when they are I guess, not boxing people in, but controlling sort of their freedom and their decisions in a particular way. They feel like there's perhaps more, they feel more comfortable that way. And I think that sort of insecurity needs to be broken down by people talking about failures more, making it humanizing leaders, opening up that space a little, because it's unhealthy for the leader to sort of control in that matter. And it's also unhealthy for people around them. So I think if you really want to lead a vision, etc., I think there's a lot of self-work that needs to be done around ego and egocentric behavior realizing you're a part of a whole, and you know, we want the universe to move in a certain direction and we can't do it alone.
Yeah, that's incredible, Samir. And it actually reminds me of the quote that you shared with us, that empathy is the most powerful force to rewire our hearts and overall society. And it really seems like your leadership style is driven by empathy. And, at the consulting firm I work at, they actually have empathy as one of their core values too. And I think it's so important because it makes you better. It makes people around you better, feel comfortable in spaces that they wouldn't feel comfortable otherwise. So thank you for sharing that. So I know we're at 7:45. I'm going to ask one last question before I pass it over to Alia for Q&A. Just one advice you'd like to share to young women in tech, aspiring, either trying to go back into the workforce, any words of wisdom you have, just in honor of like Women's History Month. Maybe Maham, we can start with you.
I think my biggest thing is be unapologetic about who you are. I think that's how I show up in a lot of my spaces. I'm like, I know I'm baller and you better accept it too. And like, it's your loss if like you don't want me there. And that's the energy I walk into rooms with. It's not for everyone and that's okay. And it's like, hey, if it's not for you, I don't want to work with you either. It wouldn't be a great fit. And so I think just having that energy and really like owning the space that you have is a huge part of it. Like an example is with running the Muslim ERG at Netflix. I know there's definitely some other Muslim employees that were like, oh, I don't want to be like labeled solely by my Muslim identity. And I was like, hey, I'm Muslim and I'm really loud and I'm really proud about it. And I'm doing this anyways. And so I'm just formalizing it now.
Love that. I love the big baller energy. I'm going to go by that mantra from now on. Sana, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think being goal oriented is really big for me. I set goals and I work backwards so I can achieve those goals. My next step would be like VP of product, right? And that's something that I really want to jump back into when I'm ready. And in order to do that, I identify goals of what steps do I need to take. And I think being humble is also really important, and raising your hand when you have questions and not being afraid, making sure that you're heard is also really important.
Yeah, I love that. Samir, anything you want to share before we wrap up to Q&A?
Yeah, very briefly, just I think trusting one's gut, one's intuition, belief has been super important for me. That's what I sort of lean into, and then being bold.
Yes, love that. Something we can all take away. Awesome. That was a really great panel discussion. I'm going to pass it over to Alia. I know we have some great energy in the chat, so I'd love to answer some of your questions. Keep them coming. We'll try to answer as much as we can before the 8 o'clock mark. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Safa. And thank you all for contributing, and to all of our attendees for participating. The chat has been popping, so that's been great. Okay, so I'll start off with some questions, and I'll gear it towards one of the speakers, but feel free to answer after if you have anything else to contribute. So this first question is from Zaliha, and it's, how do you manage your priorities with projects and home life? Samira, if you want to answer that first, I think that would be great. You mentioned you have 3 kids, and I can imagine that's a handful along with the incredible things you're doing at work. Yeah, so any insight or advice on how you manage to balance work and home life?
Yeah, so one is, I think, don't be afraid to ask for help. I think in my home life, I do ask for help. I feel like I'm running an informal team sometimes. And in the beginning, when I first became a mother, I felt like I needed to do everything myself because I wasn't being a good enough, mom or wife if I wasn't doing everything myself. So I would say one thing, just don't be afraid to ask for help. The other thing is I actually bucket everything. I have categories for everything. And then I have like specific tasks. So just ruthless prioritization, and I'm constantly reprioritizing things. And I do it like it's like a very sort of habitual thing that I'm doing. So I'm constantly moving stuff around. And then every year or every 6 months or so, I do try to do some really introspective planning where I have these 3 big goals and I'm trying to envision sort of myself in the future. And I try to just like document those so that when I'm reprioritizing and prioritizing, I'm not always doing it based on what's, due tomorrow or what I have to get done today, also with those goals in mind. Admittedly, those are the ones that have often fell to the wayside because they're medium to long term, but I'm trying to do a better job of that. So those are just a couple things.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I also love ruthlessly prioritizing and asking for help. I think that's something all of us can take away from. And then Sana and Maham, anything that you all wanted to add there?
I think she summed it up, really nicely.
Okay. Great. Awesome. So Maham, I will actually direct the next question to you. So somebody asked, how do you change careers with no prior experience? Trying to change from account management into project management specifically. So I know you had a really big career shift. Sana, I know you did as well. So Maham, if you want to start us off with any insight there, and then Sana, feel free to tag on.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, I recognized that there was an immense amount of privilege and that I was able to change careers, because I think there's no doubt that there is a financial component involved to that, and it is risky. So if you don't feel like you have a safety net in a sense to fall back on, it changes things. Like one of my first jobs when I started working at Warner Brothers in intellectual property rights management, it was not a job that required a law degree, and it was paying minimum wage. And I remember it took me a moment to be like, oh my goodness, I have all this debt. I have all these things. I don't even know if I'm going to like it. And I'm taking this job for minimum wage. And so, there's definitely a layer of privilege that I was able to make that decision, but I think I knew for myself, hey, I want to try it and let me see if I like it. And I think for me, getting those answers will help. I also think for me, the way that I went from role to role I never necessarily had a specific job title in mind. I always knew what I liked and what I didn't like. And so when I worked with survivors of domestic violence, I always enjoyed talking to people and I enjoyed doing the intake. I did not enjoy writing subpoenas or anything else. And then I went to a role in the government for a little bit. I read a lot of contracts and I enjoyed that, but I didn't talk to anyone. And so I hated that. And so I think really, it sounds really basic, but a lot of these elemental basic things that you do like or don't like in your current role, I think were really helpful in me figuring out what my next role was and really playing to that. And I think someone else in the comments mentioned that when you're trying to jump role to role, and if you don't have enough experience, I think you don't always need the exact experience. Making sure you talk about your transferable skill set is huge. And I think that was a big part of it for me.
Just a little bit to add on to that. I agree with everything she said. She said that very beautifully. I think taking a risk is really important, and you have to sell yourself, right? If you want to transition from one department to another, one role to another, write down, a couple bullet points to sell yourself. Have like a solid elevator pitch and say why that manager should take a risk on you and what you can bring, from your past experience that could really help take this role to the next level. And I think if you go in there, very thought through, with a plan and maybe a 30, 60, 90-day plan of how you can help in this role, your organizational skills will kind of speak volumes. I've taken risk on a lot of people, more so because my mentors and managers gave me that opportunity. So I like to, give others that opportunity. But when I see someone who comes in very organized of in the first 30 days, I could do this, the next 60 days, the next 90 days, and they have some sort of plan. It might not be perfect, but it shows that they thought through how they want to transition and why they want to transition. It's a game changer for me. Within an instant, I can be like, all right, let's take this chance, let's go ahead and go into this role.
I just wanted to agree with everything that was just said. That is That's been my experience as well. The only thing I would add to it is I have often gone into an organization and just looked at it with a fresh pair of eyes and come up with a way that I would, if I were in the role, what I would improve or what I would change. And for me, that's worked really well. Apparently, people appreciate sort of that outside in thing and bringing in some sort of new idea and actually telling them how things could be different in a good way, in a positive way.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those are all like really great points. I feel like a lot of what I heard was hype yourself up, be confident, and really make sure that you can talk to them and be just as confident about yourself as they should be in you, about the skill set that you have, even if it's not in the same role. Yeah, so that all sounded great. Okay, going on to another question. So I think this came up when we were talking a little bit about, being represented in community spaces or career spaces. So when it comes to initiating conversations about Muslims and wanting to integrate ERG groups for Muslims, how can someone do that at a more entry-level individual role rather than as a decision maker or an upper management? So Sana, I was going to ask you to answer this one.
Oh, that's a tough one. Can you come back to me? Because I want to think that through.
Yeah, of course. Maham or Samira, let me know if you guys have any insight on this. I know it's a little bit tougher wanting to do it at a more entry-level role, especially if you've had more experience higher up there. But yeah, any ways that you all feel like you can create an ERG, create better community spaces for others when you're not quite in that senior role yet.
I would say, while Sana's thinking, I wouldn't limit myself to just your workplace. I think you can find community in a lot of different spaces. And I say community, not just Muslim community, because I think that's been really important for me personally. It's just finding people in general that you can connect with. And I feel like that can help open doors. So for example, when we've been talking about trying to start a Muslim ERG at Netflix, it was like through other networking events and friends that I had in the entertainment industry that I was like, oh, Disney has a Muslim employee resource group. Let's talk to them. And I think we really helped each other that way. So if you don't feel like you have anything right now at your company may be big, your company may be small, but there's no doubt that in your area, there's other people feeling the way that you feel. And I think being able to connect with them and almost kind of learn from their experiences and see where they're at and get ideas from them is probably the best way to start.
Yeah, that's great. And great point. I don't think we should silo ourselves off to just the Muslim community. Similar to Muslim Women in Tech, we found such incredible solidarity with other communities that experience a lot of the same obstacles that we do. So it's incredible to learn from those experiences as well. And then Sana, did you want to mention anything else, or Samira?
I was just thinking back on how I was just thinking networking, inside your organization and outside, and just, keep that line of communication open, talk to everyone and anyone you can, and just learn from them. And that would, really help push you.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is partnering with someone senior. I know it's tough to do, but if you can find one person who's been at the organization for a while to partner with, I think it's almost an advantage to be newer, fresher, younger. You bring a different energy, and that partnership can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. Okay, so I know we're almost coming up on time, so I'm going to ask just one last question. So similar to how we talked about changing roles, is there any advice you all would give to people who are looking for new opportunities? I know that can be especially difficult right now with how the job market is, but any advice on trying to jump into the workforce or specifically finding opportunities in tech, especially if you haven't been there? And I'll open this up for everyone.
I think one way that I also transitioned into that is I kind of raised my hand for special projects that, you know, a lot of managers and executive teams said, I know everyone's plate is full, but does anybody have capacity to take this on? I always raise my hand. Maybe that was a good thing, maybe it wasn't, because sometimes I didn't have that capacity, but I still wanted to show that initiative, to show that drive. And I think once you do that and your name starts to get heard throughout the organization, that, you know, you're ready to roll up your sleeves and you know, jump in. They kind of remember you in times of, you know, open positions or promotions and things like that. And also, you know, definitely working with your friend tours and mentors really helps you kind of stand out from the rest of the team.
Yeah, I'm just going to add quickly, I think really just networking. And again, as I said earlier, just in different places, I think, again, for me specifically, I tried to volunteer for causes that I was really passionate about. And so I worked with like Step Up that helps mentor young women. And that was like really enjoyable and fun for me. But being able to meet other like young female professionals through them was great. And just like learning more, I think, and if you know someone at a company and you can get insight into the company culture, it really makes a difference for how you can show up when you're applying to go to try to move to that company. And so I think trying to find those connections in natural, organic ways. I feel like sometimes if you go straight to like a directly networking event, it's kind of awkward and it feels like, oh, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? But I think if you can like volunteer in spaces where you can find there's already a commonality or a common interest that you can connect with a person, it goes a long way. So for all the women here, I would highly recommend Step Up. They're a great organization if you want to work with high school students. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the most sort of important things have been said. Just knowing someone in the company goes a tremendous way. And I sometimes will look for people who, like, their profile resonates with me in the sense that I would want to be in their sort of role, or I can learn something from them. And I have reached out to people cold like that, and they've helped me. But I would say, you know, the better shot would be just like someone you know well in the company.
Great. I think that's all wonderful advice. I think this has been an incredible learning experience for all of us. I think you all have really helped. I can speak for probably everyone here to gain some confidence in ourselves, to aspire for roles like yours, and hopefully overcome a lot of the imposter syndrome that I'm sure a lot of us experience on a day-to-day. So I think it's incredible to see like really successful, multifaceted Muslim women in the roles that we want to be in one day. So thank you all so much for your time. Safa, anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
Yeah, I know we're at 8:01 again. Thank you so much for joining our speakers. We're incredible. It's just been such a pleasure listening to your journeys, and I'm personally really excited about just what we can all accomplish together. And it's so important that we get to hear your stories as a community. So thank you again. And also to everyone who joined on a Tuesday evening, really appreciate it. I know people get tired after work, but again, we're really grateful for your support, and we can't be MWT without all of you. So again, thank you so much. And as Alia mentioned, please stay in touch with us. We want to continue serving our community, making sure that we help you succeed in your careers in whatever capacity that is. So stay in touch with us. We'll probably have more events coming up soon, taking a quick hiatus for Ramadan. But yeah, if we don't chat before then, Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. And again, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions. Thank you all so much.